one of the reasons I enjoy watching Terence Crawford is because he gets people out of there. And that was the case here against David Avanesyan in his latest defense of his WBO World Welterweight title. This was actually, God, I'm going to have to actually count here. It goes all the way back to, where are we at? 2016. So John Molina Jr., Felix Diaz, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This was the 10th knockout in a row for Terence Crawford, unless I just miscounted there. I believe that's 10 knockouts in a row. He's stopped everyone since 2016. 6 years of knockouts. Now, some people could say that they haven't been the best quality opponents. He hasn't been fighting the elite guys. Okay, but let's compare it to Errol Spence, who, some people would say has been fighting a better level of competition. Now, I certainly would agree that your Dennis Ugas is better than David Avanesyan. So I'll give Errol Spence that for sure, and he stopped Ugas, of course. Prior to that, Danny Garcia. A faded Danny Garcia. With Bud Crawford, he beat Sean Porter. Prior to that, I would say Sean Porter is a better win than Danny Garcia. Both guys passed it, but I would say Sean Porter is still a better win. Prior to that, Bud Crawford beat Kell Brook. Again, a faded Kell Brook. And of course, Errol Spence beat Sean Porter. This is back in 2019. Prior to that, Kavaliauskas for Bud Crawford and Mikey Garcia for Errol Spence. So, I would say this is actually a similar level of opposition, to be honest with you. And Mikey Garcia, go past that, you go to Ocampo. And for Terence Crawford, you're on Amir Khan. Probably Ocampo's better. So, yeah, I give the slight edge over the past few years in competition to Errol Spence. But it's only a slight edge. There hasn't been a massive difference between the level of competition. I would just say for their most recent fights, that's where it was the biggest gap with regards to Ugas. I think he's quite a lot better than David Avanesyan. Nevertheless, I was impressed by Terence Crawford's performance. Of course, he showed the enormous gulf between a fighter like him and, let's say, a domestic fighter in the UK like Josh Kelly, who is athletically gifted, but he doesn't have the skill, he doesn't have the poise, he doesn't have the mindset, he doesn't have the coolness in the pocket, he doesn't have the inside skills of a Terence Crawford, who easily repelled David Avanesyan's rather crude advances. He easily repelled it. He did get clipped with a couple shots here and there, but of course Terence Crawford didn't panic. He stayed on his job. He figured things out. And he realized he could stand with Avanesyan because for the first few rounds, he was moving around, making some calculations, seeing what he could do. But after a while, perhaps after getting clipped a couple times, he thought, you know what, this guy doesn't really hit that hard. I know how to angle my body to avoid the shots he's throwing on the inside. I feel like I'm the stronger guy anyway. I feel like I can get to him. And he did seem to hurt Avanesyan, or certainly get his respect in, I want to say, the 5th and 6th rounds. And I think Bud Crawford sensed that. He stepped on the gas. He stood with him up close. I believe it was kind of a reverse 1-2, the combination that ended the fight, where Bud Crawford for a left hand, I think maybe a left hand first, and then he came through with the right hook, which hit Avanesyan bang on the chin and knocked him out cold. As far as I'm aware, Avanesyan's never been knocked out cold before. But let's have a look at his record here. David Avanesyan was 29-3-1 going in. He'd been stopped by Kavaliauskas in 6 rounds a few years ago. That was 2018. Lost to Lamont Peterson on points in 2017. Okay, split decision draw and lost his second pro fight on points. So again, not aware of this guy having ever been knocked out before. I assume he hasn't, since the Kavaliauskas defeat was only a TKO. But Bud Crawford goes in there and does exactly that. Cleans him out. Now again, people can say that, and I've never thought particularly highly of Avanesyan. He's a tough guy, he's dangerous, yes, at a certain level. But he is crude, he is basic. Like when they were talking about the prospect of Conor Benn fighting Avanesyan, I always felt like that was a 50-50. Because there were a lot of people saying, oh, he's going to destroy Conor Benn, and that's why Eddie won't put him in with Avanesyan. Maybe Eddie just, saw it as dangerous, and just because Eddie thinks something, it doesn't mean it's the case, right? Personally, I always felt like Conor Benn against Avanesyan was a good 50-50 scrap, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if Conor Benn beat him. I didn't think Avanesyan was ever that good. Tough, yes, but very limited. And I think Terence Crawford showed that. Now, with regards to the Errol Spence fight, hopefully it can be made. Hopefully Errol Spence's leg injury that is apparently picked up from his latest accident, hopefully that doesn't have any bearing on the fight happening in terms of preventing it from happening, and we'll see it next. Some people have compared Avanesyan to Spence in the sense that he comes forward and he's going to apply pressure, and the commentators actually, Paulie Malignaggi and whatnot, were saying that this is the area right up close where Errol Spence normally does his best work. And certainly Spence was tremendously impressive against Ugas in the pocket because he was perpetual motion. He didn't leave Ugas alone. Once he entered the pocket after a couple rounds, he worked Ugas over. Will he be able to do that to Terence Crawford? Crawford is obviously much better than Ugas, much more dynamic. He's got a better boxing brain, he's more fluid, he's faster, and he's a better puncher. So if there's any issue with Errol Spence's punch resistance, Terence Crawford's the guy to find it out. And yeah, Crawford got caught with a few shots here and there. He's the older guy than Errol Spence, but I'm expecting him to test Spence's whiskers. And we saw what happened to Spence against Ugas when he got hit with a good shot. He was staggered twice in the same round, a few seconds apart. And the second time he got staggered, he went reeling back into the ropes. For my money, Terence Crawford hits harder. And if he can catch Spence with the shots that Ugas caught him with, Terence Crawford ain't going to let him off the hook. Terence Crawford is a finisher. He'll go in there and get the job done. So if it's, if you're asking me, I would give a slight advantage at this point to Terence Crawford over Errol Spence. I'm certainly not writing Errol Spence off. Wouldn't at all be shocked if he managed to get the win. As I say, he impressed me tremendously against Ugas. His work rate, his relentlessness, his tenacity in the pocket. Obviously, he finds angles in different shots and just keeps chopping away with those short punches, right? And perhaps that's going to be very difficult for Terence Crawford to contend with. But I just feel like Crawford is, a bit more fluid out of the two, a bit faster. Might have the better chin at this stage. Might be the better puncher at this stage. So hopefully we get to see it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about Terence Crawford's performance here. Do you think this performance will scare Errol Spence and PBC off? Are they going to try and long the situation out and hope that Terence Crawford gets old? Is it the whole Mayweather routine again? Retire or go in a different direction. They can't use the cross the street stuff anymore, right? Because Terence Crawford's a free agent. But Mayweather used to use all kind of shenanigans. Oh no, we can't fight him. He's got problems here and problems there and this, that, and the other. And when I say problems, it's when a fighter had a loss somewhere in his past. Mayweather would often use that as a reason why he shouldn't fight him, even though he fought Zab Judah coming off a loss. Do you know what I mean? But Mayweather used to try all kind of shenanigans to delay fights, where he'd fight them eventually in some instances, but he wanted to delay fights to maybe have more of a look at a guy, figure him out a bit more, allow him to take some damage in other fights before eventually jumping in with him. I hope that Errol Spence is not doing that with Terence Crawford. I want to see the fight right now. No waiting, no messing around. Let's get in the ring and do the fight. Some people are blaming Terence Crawford, obviously the Errol Spence fanboys, the PBC cult, and it is like a cult over there at PBC. But look, Terence Crawford does pack out arenas in his home state, in Omaha, Nebraska. He hasn't done any great pay-per-view numbers, so he's fully conceded the fact that he's the B-side. How much do you concede at the negotiating table by way of contract clauses, getting the short end of the stick in terms of the money? Because he says he conceded virtually every point, or most points. But in the end, he says there was just 1 point too many that they wanted him to concede. And at that stage, he decided to go in a different direction. I mean, it's a thing where, do you care more about the money or the legacy at this stage? And with Errol Spence, he holds the cards in terms of the money. You know, he holds the cards in terms of even the prestige, because he's been in there with a few of the bigger names at welterweight. And in his next fight, apparently he's going to be fighting Keith Thurman. And even though Keith Thurman is past it, again, in terms of names, people that the public recognize, that's a better scalp to have on your resume than David Avanesyan. So, again, Spence is kind of in the power position. He's kind of in the driving seat. And maybe Terence Crawford, if he wants the legacy, he'll have to just concede to all the points, you know. And he's already conceded most of them, apparently, but maybe he'll have to concede to all of them if he wants that legacy. But if he's not worried about legacy, because he said in some of his recent interviews that if he never fights Errol Spence, it won't harm his legacy. Well, that remains to be seen. I personally think it will harm his legacy. So, you know, it's his choice. I have no doubt at all that Terence Crawford wants to fight. But I don't think Spence wants to fight. And I don't think PBC want to fight as much as Crawford does. Because if they did, if Spence and PBC saw the fight as legacy defining as the way we do, the fans, I think they'd be more willing to concede a couple points to Terence Crawford, even though they're definitely the A side and Crawford has never disputed that. I think perhaps they'd be a little more reasonable. We're not privy to the contracts, of course, but as outsiders looking in, nobody has denied that Crawford has conceded more than the other side. So, yeah, they clearly think that they don't need Crawford, and it's a nice fight, but ultimately it won't define Errol Spence's legacy. So, yeah, the side that's willing to concede more than the other tends to be the one that wants to fight a bit more in most instances. That's my take on it. Give me your take in the comment section below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and it's 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.